I thought ChatGPT and AI resources and tools was helping my family until this happened. I had a case where I was talking to my teenage child about their use of AI. So my teen built an app using Base 44 where they were able to develop a budgeting app to help them figure out their goals going into high school. My teen also used it to pitch and organize for a fundraiser that he was able to host at his school. In several different cases, my teen was able to use AI to help better transform, progress, all the things in his world. But you want to know what this young man said to me? He told me in the United States of America that he thinks I use AI too much. And I was, okay, because I'm using it too much, but how? How, Sway? How am I using it too much when you just used it for all of the accomplishments you've been making in this quarter? So I decided to have a conversation with my child and the rest of my family about AI, critical thinking, and what it means to partner with AI versus what does it mean to be a human. And the be a human part is an ongoing project that I have here on the channel of really understanding why are people the way that they are with one another. When I think of the word humankind, I think of being kind to humans. Ew. However, there's so many different situations where we see people being, is it unkind? Diskind? Diskind is not it. But we see people that aren't kind to one another. And what this makes me think about is how are we as a human species able to manage AI if we haven't developed critical thinking skills, if we haven't developed emotional intelligence, if we haven't been able to really talk through why we treat one another the way that we do. And so I did pause because I wanted to know why my child thought that I used AI too much. I wanted to talk through questions and inquiries just like this with my children when it comes to the space of being a parent and AI. So when I was growing up, there wasn't AI, but there was something that was going on. We had the internet that our parents had to navigate through. And now this generation has AI and social media and all of these things to consider. So going back to this conversation that I'm having with my son, instead of saying,
Mira, first of all, what you're not going to do is do it.
I want to hear you out. What is it about how I interact with AI, or what is it that you know that I do with AI that makes you think that I use it too much? So then he gives me my response, and I thought through it, and I said, this is what happens. This is what happens with humans, is that we make assumptions and we don't stop and pause and consider submitting a question. The better question would be, it seems like you use it this way. I don't really know how you use it, but how do you use it? Then it leans into, well, this is how I use it, and I'm teaching my son and I'm sharing with my son the critical thinking skills applied to using AI. I think that the way that I use AI in a critical way is a part of me not having AI for years. I had to develop critical thinking skills. I had to develop emotional intelligence. I had to understand myself and my identity in order to know how to receive the information and how to navigate through the responses and prompts. So for instance, when AI or ChatGPT became a really big thing, people were using it blindly because they were excited, like, wow, look at all the things they can do. And then it realized in some spaces like, hey, that's not right. And we know that's not right because there's something in your thinking, there's something in your brain that says, alert, alert, alert. This is incorrect. This doesn't look right. So when we think about how these tools have been developed, they're developed somehow with all of the pool of human thoughts, all of their ideas and their opinions, their expressions, their think pieces, their case studies, their philosophies, and they are giving you a response in some way. And that might be a very elementary way of looking at it. I'm pretty sure AI is more advanced than what I'm going to talk through in this video. But on the common level, the basic level of using these tools, this is how it's understood. That you are maybe in some cases using it as a over glorified version of how you were using Google before Google implemented AI into its search engine. So we're talking through AI, we're talking through critical thinking, what type of questions, how do you know, what do you think about, boom, bam, bam. So we get to a place where we understand each other. We understand both that critical thinking is still applied when we're engaging with these tools. And I am thankful as a mother that my children are practicing critical thinking, and it was evident in a conversation that we had over the weekend. So I walk into the house with this conversation in my back pocket. I walk into the house and I'm thinking about what my children are considering when it comes to kindness. So I randomly come into the house and I point at one child and I say, quick, give me 20 reasons or 20 cases. I said, give me 20 cases where you are willing to do something kind for someone without anything in return. So then my child start listing off the things that they would do without needing anything in return. That's point to the next child, so on. They're listing off these things about what they would do with nothing in return. But the other layer is that I do want something in return. There's this internal gratification, this internal satisfaction that people want when they're engaging with humankind. And that is as simple as a thank you, a hello, a good morning, a goodbye, a good night. How are you? How are you feeling? So let me tell you why I'm talking through this. Because it's going back to that human interaction. Why is it so important to be a human? So after the conversation with my son, I knew our family needed to sit down together and really think through this. So I want to share with you a quick activity that led to the list of 7 ways to partner with AI, 7 ways to be careful. I walked into the house and asked my children, give me 20 reasons you do something kind for someone expecting nothing back. So they started listing aloud. Then I pushed a little further. What if that person doesn't even say thank you? What are you actually not willing to do without some appreciation? And what came out after was the need for something in return. They admitted they still wanted small things, a thank you, a good morning, some sign that the other person actually noticed them. This is what I'm calling the human filter, that part of us that notices, that responds, that needs a real connection. So when we finally sat down and talk about partnering with AI, we knew what we were trying to protect. But anyway, let's move on to what we actually got out of these activities that we did over the weekend. One was we were able to brainstorm 7 different ways that we can partner with AI and 7 different ways that needs to remain or is questionable when it comes to removing AI completely. What are the 7 ways where you shouldn't have AI involved in a conversation? What are 7 ways where we can partner with AI? And so I'm going to go through that list with you all today. But I also want to invite you to think about having these conversations with people that are close with you. If you're a parent, having it with your children, having it with your family, and really thinking through this with your child, with your children. In my worldview and my perspective, I am growing with my children through this phase of AI. I'm learning this right alongside of them. And it's a very interesting task and experience. But this particular activity of sitting down and talking and going through questions was so important because it, one, showed me the development of my parenting, but it also showed me where there are gaps, where we could grow, parts that we're not considering. I didn't consider they were important because I've been conditioned or I've been in an environment where it wasn't treated as important. So here are the 7 ways we thought humans could partner with AI. One was organizing thoughts and ideas. One of my teenagers said it was quicker when you just jog down ideas and AI can organize them. I agree with this. There are people who know what they feel but struggle to structure their thoughts. So in this way, AI can help people articulate ideas, write, brainstorm, and process information faster. But even here, we talked about the importance of critical thinking because organizing thought is different than thinking for you. 2, summarizing information. The children brought up using AI to summarize long forms, documents, and information, and mentioned in a world where people are overwhelmed by paperwork, contracts, systems, and information overload, that can actually be helpful. One of them mentioned uploading forms and asking AI for rough summaries, but then we started asking ourselves, if humans stop reading deeply altogether, what happens to comprehension? Number 3, budgeting and planning. My teenagers used AI to help make a budget app and even help petition and organize school events. And that opened a real interesting conversation because there are things people were never taught. Budgeting, planning, organizing, taxes, financial literacy. And AI can sometimes make information more accessible to people who otherwise couldn't afford help. Number 4, studying and learning support. We also talked about studying, and I thought this point was important because one of my children said AI can help explain concepts from different perspectives. But then another important line came up. Put those foundations first and then outsource them. That came from me. That may have been one of the biggest takeaways from the entire conversation because if you do not have the foundations built and you blindly rely on the tool, who are you and what are your gifts that you're serving? Number 5, health, fitness, and routines. One of the children argued that workout plans and health routines are actually one of the strongest uses for AI. That's because he plays sports. AI can scan thousands of workout routines, body types, and health suggestions quickly. But then we also question, does convenience remove discipline? Does personalization remove human encouragement? Does a person really need a physical trainer? Do they work together? Number 6, simulation and preparation. One of the most thoughtful points that was made was about simulations. They talked about how AI can simulate possible outcomes and help people prepare. And that made me think about weather predictions, medical simulations, mental health simulations, and empathy exercises. One of my children even said simulations could help people understand experiences they never personally lived.
Number 7, tedious administrative work. One of the biggest themes was burnout. My teenager said humans hire people to save time, and now AI becomes the worker. And honestly, that's part of why AI is growing so quickly. Humans are tired, but then we landed on another question. If AI saves us time, what do humans become with the extra time? Then we moved into one other side of the conversation. And that's 7 areas where we thought AI should not replace humans, even if we thought it was a good idea to do so. Number 1, social interaction. This is really, really important to my teenagers, especially when I share with them stories about the use of ChatGPT with therapy. Although I can understand the perspective of someone using ChatGPT for therapy if they weren't having good results, the teenagers were in an uproar when I mentioned that anyone would use the tool for such. This was the strongest agreement in the room. They mentioned that human interaction is a fundamental building block of society. One said, what makes humans so great is that we stick in groups, socialize, and work together. They were concerned that if humans replace emotional interaction with AI, people would slowly stop practicing real connection. Number 2, emotional development and relationships. One of the biggest concerns was emotional dependency. You can't live in this AI bubble, said the oldest, where everything is sunshine and rainbows. And honestly, that makes sense. And I am a fan of living in a world of sunshine and rainbows, so I had to do some adjusting here. Because real humans challenge us. Real relationships involve conflict, misunderstanding, forgiveness, patience, insecurity, accountability, and those things shape people. Number 3, foundational learning. Build those foundations first and then outsource them. We talked about the danger of using AI before learning how to think, before learning how to research, before learning how to struggle through confusion, because struggle itself develops humans. Number 4, ethical and life-altering decisions. My children specifically brought up weapon systems, surveillance, and military decisions. One of them asked, can you trust AI to make ethical decisions? And that became one of the biggest concerns of the conversation. Not whether AI is intelligent, but whether humans are mature enough to use it responsibly. And that goes into those bad agents. And activity that I want us to go through in this assignment is the center of it all. It's not too much about what AI is doing, but the human behind the AI. And I'm pretty sure that's an argument that we've heard across the board, but we have to keep echoing this. We have to make that known that it is about us when we're using any tool. Number 5, creativity disconnected from human experience. We had a very, very long conversation about art. One of the teenagers who's very, very involved in theater and creative writing and drawing and all of the aspects of art really thought it was important to leave AI out of art. AI extracts from other human pieces of art is what one said. And I thought that was such an interesting way to say it because art is not only output. Sometimes art is evidence that someone lives something. And I am a person who uses AI for YouTube thumbnails. So we discussed the process that I took in order to build the YouTube thumbnail. What were the prompts that I put in? What was a part of my thinking process and my design that isn't easily communicated to someone who might create my product and then create it in a vision that I didn't see for myself. And if I wanted to continue to adjust and adjust and adjust, that human on the other side, that artist might get fatigued. They might get annoyed. But when you're working with art in the form of YouTube thumbnails, do you absolutely need someone going through so many different revisions? Number 6, basic human responsibility. We even talked about chores, sweeping, dishes, cooking, cleaning. And at first it sounded small. I even thought, as a mother, if I could have a robot come in and do everything in the house, it would be a lot easier for me. If I did not have to come after the children and remind them to do their chores, that would be a lot easier. But we had to pause when it came to this simple task to give away because my children connected those things to discipline, responsibility, and humility. One of them said, if humans outsource everything, eventually people may not even know how to care for themselves. And number 7, which is the favorite of them all, and one that we'll keep implementing in our themes on this channel, is critical thinking itself. This may have been the biggest conclusion we landed on and was throughout all of our different aspects. You need to understand when AI is going to be wrong and when it's going to be right. One of the oldest said, if you don't know the knowledge yourself, you're just blind and following a random AI. And honestly, that may be the entire conversation because maybe the goal isn't avoiding AI. Maybe the goal is becoming thoughtful enough, emotionally mature enough, and human enough to use it wisely. Let me know in the comments. Are there any other ideas or perspectives you would add to this conversation? Would you have this assignment with your children? Do you know what they think about AI? What are some of the elements in AI that are useful for partnering? And what are some of the elements in AI where AI should not be involved at all? It should remain human. Let us know in the comments.
When I think about AI in my own world, I always consider it a place where it could save us more time because we've outsourced a lot of our creativity, our experience in this world in order to chase money. And when we're chasing money, it's in some cases, not all, it's leaving people in this space where life has become just surviving. And those are good conversations to have. So picking out this one, we're thinking about our social interactions and how delicate it is to use AI when it comes to things like love, partnership, when I think about therapy. But when I thought about this topic, it made me think about ChatGPT and how people at one point was using ChatGPT as a sounding board for their therapy. But that identity or that understanding of self is if you're going to go into a space that's without human connection, you have to be careful. But on the other side, if we really are considering this as a full picture, you have to consider that you can go into the same space with a human and it still be just as dangerous. What's most important? What's the common denominator of what you know about yourself, how you care about yourself, so that you don't get manipulated and go with either that human that's going to guide you in the wrong direction or that AI tool. It's not the case that it's just better for the human just because they are human for them to manipulate you or to misguide you. Either way, the common denominator is you and your choices. So developing those critical skills, being mature about the way you think about how you use these products and resources is a good foundation for going through both of the sides of the list. The thing here is, if I'm looking at this full picture and I'm thinking about this world of AI, we also have people who have used AI and used tools like ChatGPT for therapy and felt like there was better results because there's no bias, there is no human. It's almost like taking the human out of the therapy part was more beneficial because the human has their human responses that could be filled with jealousy or rage or ego. And so if you take that out of that interaction, is it better for the recipient to have that type of interaction without human connection? And it's a very tricky slope. It's one of the ones that we're still developing. But when we think about who people are, their identity, why this is an important baseline is if you know who you are, how you interact, what your values are, then you can make the decision whether or not you trust someone without credentials, whether that trust is the human who has had life experience built up versus the AI tool that they don't have credentials, but they just have a wealth of information that they're using to facilitate the conversation with you without bias. Those are interesting questions when it comes to this particular case where they're suing ChatGPT for actually stating that they were a doctor and giving out a license ID. That's wild.
A Reuters article reported that Pennsylvania sued Character.ai after the state claimed chatbots on the platform were presenting themselves as licensed therapists and medical professionals. According to the lawsuit, one chatbot allegedly gave a fake license number and suggested it could prescribe medication. That article connects closely to this conversation. People are increasingly going online looking for guidance, emotional support, coaching, counseling, instruction, or clarity. At the same time, humans online can exaggerate credentials, perform expertise, manipulate emotionally, or present themselves as more qualified than they actually are. AI tools can create a similar confusion because the responses sound confident, polished, emotionally aware, with authority. So a major part of using AI responsibly is developing discernment, understanding how to verify information, slow down, think critically, and recognize that sounding informed is different than actually being qualified or trustworthy.
What I want to think through with you all is, what is the difference? If someone uses AI tools for their everyday work, the idea is, how do you use it? What do you think are safe ways to use it without outsourcing your creativity or your intelligence? And the prerequisite is, have you learned and built these skills by yourself and then they became mundane, or they're now routine, or they're robotic, and so therefore you can now outsource it to these tools? Those are the things that we were thinking through in this conversation as we put together this list. But going from the idea of the ChatGPT, the therapist, all of those ideas, another sensitive spot is art. Because when I think of human beings, when I think of humankind, being kind as a human, I think about the stories, the art that comes from this human experience, even with the fact that there are flaws in us as humans, the fact that there's pain, the fact that there's struggle. That is part of the human experience. I also want to point out that there are small entrepreneurs, or entrepreneurs that are growing, I should say, with holistic products and services that I didn't see advocated, or I didn't see promoted. So sometimes at this point in my life, I thought, okay, when there's coupons, it's like $5 off here or $7 off of here. It was always for products and services that were not holistic. We didn't have products and services that was talking about take care of your body with this natural scrub. And so I bring that up because I have two products here on the screen that I have used. This first one is an activated charcoal toothpaste. and this other is a remineralizing tooth powder. And this is from a creator called Royal Roots Wellness. And to me, this is human creation, the art that goes beyond here, the science and the studying that goes behind this type of creation is beautiful. What happens is mass production puts us in a space where now we have to add all these fillers or artificial ingredients that we may not need in order to make those things better. And so when we have someone making these holistic products and services, there should be space and room for it. But beyond that, I'm only going to show two, but there's so many different creators I had interviews with that were authors. And this goes to the art of our experience here on Earth. That some of it has been painful dealing with other humans and dealing with navigating these structures and systems that in some ways have been designed to fail groups of people. One being finances. So there's this book by Rakim Sabri. It's called Overcoming Financial Trauma. This is art to me, right? If he built this story without the experience, without living life, but just put into the ChatGPT prompt, make me a story that resonates with financial trauma, it could still meet the needs. It still could teach people about how to navigate trauma. But the fact that he's attached to the story, that we can have a conversation about this and we can think deeply of how to actually make these changes from a felt place, that is art to me. So I'm going to read this chapter. It says, the trauma of poverty and financial instability. You may be asking yourself, who doesn't have financial trauma? That is not only an excellent question, but an appropriate first step toward examining the effectiveness of systems we navigate economically, politically, socially, internally. In this part of the book, the purpose is to trigger or introduce you to a pattern of thought you may not have previously acknowledged or considered when examining your relationship with money. If you were taught about money growing up, or even in your formal income earning years, why were you not taught to conceptualize it through the lens of your personal psychology, cultural values, or financial systems? If you were not taught about money growing up and instead adopted social taboos around the appropriateness of discussing your finances as something you avoid, along with religion and politics, was that accidental or is it by design? Now, this is conversation, y'all. These are good questions. This is art. So when I think about writing our ideas and our experiences, we have those. We navigate through life and we get that opportunity to create art from it. And that's an experience that the human has. To make this particular art, art is probably number one on the list of don't use AI. But y'all, the other part of this is that what if you are partnering with AI, with your thoughts, with your ideas, with your prompts based off of your experience to help you get to a situation that you may have not gotten to because of limited resources. This is why I'm an advocate for resources like AI. If it did not, let me still research what it's doing to the environment. But if I have a good understanding of this tool, there are people and humans that aren't helping people transition with their lessons. This book is how this creator helps people transition through their lessons. And you, as the consumer, decide, yeah, I'm going to read this. Not only am I going to read this, I'm going to apply this to my life and see what happens from it, see what fruit comes from it. Here's another one. I had this guest on the show as well. She reads her book on her podcast. And this is a book called What Was Planted Here Before I Arrived, a journey of reimagining your patterns. Okay, I'm going to read this part 3. That says, rewiring scarcity and survival. She writes, by my command, I shift into the best possible timeline for me, where I have learned the skills required to shift my life in the direction of my truest desires. I shift into the best possible timeline where my focus is on embodying who I want to be rather than condemning who I've become. I am creating a life that I would not trade for any other. I shift into the best possible timeline where every spark of guidance and inspiration that I need seeks me out relentlessly. Every tool and resource that I need in order to make my dreams come true is magnetized to me by the sheer force of my will and the strength of my desires. I shift into the best possible timeline where I shed all fear of living the life of my dreams. I am the co-creator of my experience and the master of my reality. I have the power to turn the tides. Amen. I'm not sure if it's pronounced Ace or I said. I put that on the screen so y'all can read it. But as I put these two next to me, this is art. The human experience is art, which also might have a little bit of trauma. It might have a little bit of hate. It might have a little bit of love. It might have a little bit of people manipulating. It might have some parts of other humans destroying that. But what I like about this is that there is a creator component of us. Well, we co-create. We decide by our choices and how we see the world, what we want to gain from the world. So when we think about AI, one of my children kept repeating that it's about the person using the tool rather than the tool itself. If you're using it for good, are the outcomes good? Which is why we go back to this idea of, is it AI that's a problem? Or is it that humans aren't mature enough to use these tools?
I want to introduce this model, and I'm still working through it, called the human filter. And this is a model that I want to use with my children. And as I talk through these AI concepts and stories and cases to apply to our own self-inventory and our self-investigation. How do we show up with AI? If AI is here to stay, what is our role as humans? Where do we take accountability? And so while talking with the children, the center of the AI conversation is the human. If AI can organize information, generate responses, predict, automate, and stimulate, inside of us is what amplifies that tool. So fear can become more fear, wisdom can become more wisdom, bias can become more bias, curiosity can become more curiosity. That's why I started thinking about this human filter. So in this model, before information reaches our beliefs, AI influences our decisions and accepts advice. We put a filter, and that filter is us. The quality of the output often depends on the quality of the filter. So our questions go from what can AI do? And then they stretch into what kind of human is using this? The human filter has 7 parts. First is the freedom signals. Every emotional reaction contains information. Something makes us angry. Something makes us defensive. Something makes us feel validated. Instead of immediately reacting, we investigate the signal. Why did this trigger me? What belief is underneath this reaction? Second, there's discernment. AI can sound confident. People can sound confident. Social media can sound confident. And confidence and truth are not the same thing. We shift to what evidence supports this? Who benefits from this information? What perspectives might be missing? Then we have failure exposure. One of the fastest ways to stop growing is to protect every idea from challenge. Mature humans learn how to survive being wrong, testing our ideas. We welcome correction. We remain teachable. Fourth, there's diverse perspectives. Algorithms often give us more of what we already agree with. Growth often happens when we encounter a perspective we didn't expect. Different cultures, different experiences, different beliefs, different stories. The new question that forms is, what perspective am I missing? Fifth, we have fruit analysis. We shift from, does this work? And we start asking, what does this produce? What type of person does this create? What happens when this scales across a family, community, or a society? Because effective and healthy are not always the same thing. Sixth, vulnerability and self-honesty. Sometimes the biggest blind spots are the ones we carry ourselves. Am I looking for truth or comfort? Am I growing or escaping? The more honest we are with ourselves, the harder we become to manipulate. And finally, human practice. Have conversations, practice empathy, creativity, patience, community, service, gratitude. These are the things that keep us human. Technology can support them. Technology doesn't need to replace them. The future of AI is about us becoming wiser humans, maturing as humans, because every tool eventually passes through a filter. And the most important filter in the room is still the human being using it.
As I talk through this draft about the relationship with AI, I'm also interested in a relationship with AI and how it can be a resource for making money online, for reducing the stress that comes with navigating through worlds created by humans or systems created by humans that were with flaws. How do we take some of that power back by using these tools with good intentions? First, identify who you are. Second, realize what fruit comes from the lessons and experiences that you learned. What is it that you want to create? Like in that last passage, is co-creating. But if we have a lot of humans not mature enough to know how to grow, then that's where a lot of this time that you save with AI coming in should be delegated to. Get the prerequisite. Use that time that you might get when AI is supposedly supposed to take everything over and realize, like, how do I mature? How do I become a better human? I was talking to my children about my theory here. And I said, well, what if AI gave people the opportunity to be better humans? Like, we started to practice, being kind. We remember our good mornings. We remember thank you and your welcomes are very simple things, but we can really feel this genuineness and not this dead robotic script of, hey, good morning. Thank you. How are you? And I know that there is a good percentage of people really engaging and loving this life. But there is a percentage of people who don't like it here anymore. And a lot of that has to do with us not only before we even implemented AI, or AI's been here for a while, actually. But before we started to really lean into AI, we had these human problems before. Human problems like crime, right? I'm going to bring up this other article because I thought this was a very interesting find and is leaning into some of the the conversation that the children were speaking of, because one child mentioned that, hey, AI should not be a part of anything that has to do with surveillance, identifying criminals, or weapons in war, because just like when you use some of the common tools, there's error that's made. So I'm going to pull up this article. It's actually an article from a long time ago, but these are the ideas we are still working through. So this one talks about machine bias, and I'll read part of this here. On a spring afternoon in 2014, Brisha Borden was running late to pick up her godsister from school when she spotted an unlocked kid's blue Huffy bicycle and a silver Razor scooter. Borden and her friend grabbed the bike and scooter and tried to ride them down the street in a Fort Lauderdale suburb of Coral Springs. Just as the 18-year-old girl were realizing they were too big for the tiny bicycle, which belonged to a 6-year-old boy, a woman came running after them saying, "That's my kid's stuff." Borden and her friend immediately dropped the bike and scooter and walked away. But it was too late. A neighbor who witnessed the situation had already called the police. Borden and her friend were arrested and charged with burglary and petty theft for the items, which was valued at a total of $80. Compared their crime with a similar one, the previous summer, 41-year-old Vernon Prater was picked up for shoplifting $86.35 worth of tools from a nearby Home Depot store. Prater was the more seasoned criminal. He had already been convicted of armed robbery and attempted armed robbery, for which he served 5 years in prison. In addition to another armed robbery charge, Borden had a record, but it was for misdemeanors committed when she was a juvenile. Yet something odd happened. When Borden and Prater were booked into jail, a computer program spat out a score predicting the likelihood of each committing a future crime. Borden, who was black, was rated a high risk. Prater, who was white, was rated a low risk. I think we have to mature through as human is that when it comes to these court cases, when it comes to what we have identified as a valuable race or race that doesn't have any value, is that this is immaturity, right? We haven't matured through things like this, where there's no consistency. Even there's no wisdom in how things are dealt with. And so to the credit of the mixed matching cases, this AI tool leans into that same idea, is that these AI tools, I guess, are learning from the human who haven't matured. So when I was talking to my children about it, I was thinking like, hey, what if the tools were actually developed by kind humans, humankind, where we had developed and matured how to be kind to ourselves and other people, and then the tool reflected that. And I did not expect this answer, but one of the children mentioned that the AI itself could use that kindness to our disadvantage and can still manipulate. And I was thinking like, all right, fine. But what I think what happens is if we still, even if the common denominator in all of this is that be kind humans, doesn't mean that you have to like everyone. Doesn't mean that everyone has to be best friends or you have to say thank you and good morning to like the whole world. But it means that in your own world, how do you just practice a little better to be that when we cannot master the entire world? People don't need to save the world or help other people before they save and help themselves, because that's the easy work. If we at least did some inventory, some inquiry, and sat down with ourselves with this space and time where we're not having to look each way on how to survive. We're not having to look each way to see if even somebody is roaring ready to devour us. But we have space and time to sit and pause and say like, why am I here? What am I doing here? How do we use AI to put us in a position where you're not in debt, that you are not the borrower, that you can be a lender, you can even be a giver, you can even be a cheerful giver, because you're not stripped and strapped for survival.
All my life I had to fight.
Things are upside down. I believe that ultimately being a cheerful giver means that you have so much to give that you like here. That's your creativity. That could be your money. That could be your time, because you are now co-creating with this life. You're cultivating your experience. You're giving your wisdom, whatever it is, freely giving it. When I think of this, when people say they, right? And how they're making these systems and how they're against us and all the things, that's going back to like, oh, no one else can win. I have to have slaves. I have to have people serving me. I have to put people in bondage in order to feel safe. That's immaturity. And if you find trouble with those type of ideas, if you find trouble with the system, if you find trouble with manipulation, then the only thing, not the only thing, but one thing you can start with, and I can start with, my family can start with, your neighbors can start with, is spreading these ideas, just like this ideas of gossip about these keywords trending will also be a part of like gossip, like, oh, that's happening to someone, that's crazy. And people will say, hey, that's human. Like, we are gossipers. We're human. We like this interaction. But if we are also complaining about it, if we also find trouble with some of these spaces in our world, then maybe it's like, oh, let's be creative and let's try kindness. We haven't tried that as much as we could. There's evidence of it. There are people out here being so kind, y'all. If we're in this space right now, maybe this is because I have a limited view and I want to see more of it. I want to see more of it. I want us all to see more of it, to be like, oh, this feels better. This is good fruit. But if you didn't get anything, just stay around. If you're interested in having these conversations, you can have them with me. The idea is that I'm learning and I'm organizing it in a way that I find helpful, which is through writing and also engaging in conversation. So invite yourself to the conversation by adding a comment. If you made it this far in the video, let me know with a like button so that I know that that one person in the United States of America decided to stay this long with me. And until next time, hold on to you as much as you can. Hold on to your healthy well-being and your mind. Be mindful. Bye.
Breathe.